This is Paul Schneiderman today, and I have a little brief announcement. I have a great guest today, Jim Moore. This is the 89th edition of my radio show on RainierAvenueRadio.world. My show's been known as Sports and Stuff since its inception in 2017. Well, doing a little rebranding today. My new show name is Sports Untold. What the heck? The big corporations and the big guys do some rebranding. I'm doing a little rebranding here as well. So on the 89th edition of Sports Untold, I have a terrific guest, longtime Seattle sports journalist, broadcaster, writer, and radio show host, Jim Moore. I believe you're also known as the go-to guy, right, Jim?
Well, yeah, that was a nickname I was given by a managing editor at the Post-Intelligencer, and I don't hear that as much as I used to, but yeah, that was kind of my nickname at the newspaper.
Love it. Well, I would probably call you Jim or Mr. Moore throughout the interview, but if I slip with go-to guy, you can roll with that then, right?
Yeah, that's fine. That's better than what I used to hear on the text line at the radio station. You know, I didn't get Jim very often. I got, idiot, moron quite a bit more than Jim. But whatever you want to call me, Paul, will work.
Believe me, Jim, I've been called a lot of names throughout my life. Jim was, the Seattle PI from about, 83 through 2009. He was a show host at 710 ESPN Seattle for about a decade or so. Jim is now doing some stuff at KJR. He writes for the Kitsap Sun. Communications major at Washington State University. Jim, by the way, how is your job search coming? Any leads at all right now?
No, not really. Today marks, and I'm keeping track, Paul. It's 6 months today that I was laid off there at the radio station, and I don't know what I'm doing. I tell people I'm jobless, or I'm unemployed, or I'm retired, or all three. I'm playing golf today. I'm watching my kids play baseball tonight. But that's a roundabout way of answering your question and saying basically that I don't have too much going on other than, like you said, I'm writing for the Kitsap Sun. I'm also writing for CougFan.com, a Washington State fan website. And then I got some good news the other day, though. I'm going to be a part-time freelance columnist writing sports for the News Tribune in Tacoma.
Okay.
And it's going to be like the Kitsap Sun, writing twice a month, and I'm really looking forward to that opportunity starting in August. And the only other thing I have going, perhaps, I've had some conversations with Todd Lywicki at the Kraken, and I'm hoping to maybe get a part-time writing job with them. And I say hoping because he hasn't no yet. He hasn't exactly said yes, but he hasn't said no, so I kind of take that as a maybe. So we'll see if something can work out there.
Well, Jim, oftentimes the best people are the ones that get laid off. You're going to land something and things are going to work out for you great. Well, Jim, I really appreciate you coming on Sports Untold on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, Jim, let me start with a question for you. You're a trained journalist, and you graduated in the communications department at WSU. You worked in print media. You've worked in print media for a long time. How do you feel about a lot of these podcasters and bloggers labeling themselves journalists when they don't have the same journalistic training that someone like you has? Does it kind of bug you in a way?
No, not really. I haven't even thought about that too much. I imagine it's pretty difficult, though, if you're one of the teams like the Mariners or Seahawks on, where do you draw the line on giving out credentials and allowing people to come to practices? It's
right.
Probably difficult for them. I do think that, there's been a change. Certainly newspapers are, going the way of covered wagons, and they're going to be gone here shortly. But it seems like there's not as much of a need for columnists as there used to be because everyone's a columnist now. And as far as me thinking I'm better than someone somehow just because I have a journalism background or that I can write better or report better, I don't know. It doesn't really bother me that much. The only thing I will say about podcasts, and no offense to you, because I'm sure you do a good job, but my wife was talking, you need to do a podcast. I had people tell me, after I got laid off, no, you need to do a podcast. You need to do a podcast. I was thinking, it sure seems like a lot of people are doing podcasts, and I don't know how many people are actually making money at it.
Right.
And so that's a long way of saying that I haven't started a podcast in the last 6 months, and I probably won't.
Well, everyone, it's a it's a choice issue. This is technically an online radio show, and I'm looking at the podcast option. But I was just kind of curious because it just seems to me I don't have a journalist background, but it just seems to me that maybe traditional journalism is getting a little diluted these days. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I think so. Like I wonder about that sometimes because it's kind of funny when I was doing the radio show, my journalism background would get in the way a little bit because I don't know, I just think that maybe it's different now for people who are covering the teams. We were always taught to be objective no matter what, even though you're writing to the home team fans for the most part. But you wanted to be right down the middle. I think guys like Ryan Divish, Bob Condotta, and a lot of the local guys, Craig Bell, the News Tribune. I mean, I could go on and on. They're all professional, and they go right down the middle of it. But it just seems to me there's more and more fans out there doing stuff, which is fine. But as far as it being diluted, I don't really feel that way. I don't know what to tell kids coming up anymore, though. I feel like there's more opportunities out there. I wouldn't necessarily tell them to go to a newspaper to find a job, but I still think if you can write and you can report that there's jobs out there for you. But honestly, Paul, I feel like things have changed a little bit as far as it seems like there's more, the home team, the home fan tip to things than there used to be.
Sure. Well, I wanted to hear your perspectives on that. We won't spend the whole interview talking about the subject, but this is not the best analogy. But I have a friend of mine's a retired minister, and he has a lot of training in theology. And these days, there's a lot of ministers who don't have training in ministry. So there's different subjects and fields where people who maybe feel they have training in the field are maybe they feel that their field's getting a little diluted. But I hear your points. I was just kind of hit me before we start this interview to get your perspectives on that. Hey, Jim, total change of subject. Jared Kelenic is being compared to Bryce Harper. If we talk again in 3 or 4 years, Jim, or hopefully sooner, will that comparison come to fruition? Put on a go-to guy crystal ball on the future career of Kelenic. Can he reach a Bryce Harper level or exceed Bryce Harper's performance levels?
I hope so. Paul, I've been watching this team since '77, and everybody knows, there've been some highs, but there've been more lows than highs, and it's been 20 years since they've made the playoffs, and so for the most part, it's been not so exciting being a Mariner baseball fan, but I think I'm excited about this kid. He's supposed to be coming up tomorrow night against the Indians, and so it should be fun, shouldn't it? And this kid seems to be the kind of kid that can handle it. Like, I used to look back, and I always thought to myself, okay, it didn't work out for Dustin Ackley. It didn't work out for Cedeno, and everybody's talking about, they brought him up too early. They rushed him. Even if they're rushing this kid, which they are, let's admit that. I mean, they said they were going to give him some time at AAA, and I guess they gave him time, 4 games, but I figured it'd be a little longer than that. But he's done so well, and so but he still has the kind of attitude where he's so confident bordering on cocky that I think even if he gets off to a slow start, that it's not going to phase him like it phased a guy like Ackley. I can't wait to see it. I like this kid's, I'm kind of a humble guy, and I don't really like seeing, displays of stuff going on there, celebrations
right.
Too much, going over the top. But I'm at a point now where I'm going, geez, I'm almost 64. They need to appeal to a younger crowd. Baseball is boring to a lot of people. I think, you talk to some coaches around the area, I don't think they have as big a turnout as they used to have. I talked to a kid the other night, and I just said to him, I go, why'd you give up baseball? Did he play for a year? He just said it was too slow. So, I mean, get the Fernando Tatises out there and do more bat flips. Let's go. I think Kelenic is a candid guy who's going to say what's on his mind. And I think he's going to be that kind of guy that people are going to get upset with. And he might be the kind of guy that other opposing fans are going to be going, man, I can't stand the Mariners because of Jared Kelenic. And I hope that's the case because I can't wait to see him play. I'm sick of watching these guys who can't hit. They can't hit. I mean, last night they had 4 hits. 3 of them were home runs, 2 by Haniger. But you look at the rest of that lineup, and so many guys sitting under 200 striking out. It's even more boring than it's been in the past.
Back to the original question, I liked all your points. Will Kelenic in 3 or 4 years be comparable to Bryce Harper? You think he'll be that good?
Oh, man, I guess I avoided your question. It
No,
wasn't intentional, Paul. It was not intentional at all.
No, you made great points.
I hope so. I have no idea. I don't know. But good God, I hope that kid is in the same sentence, or at least the same paragraph, in comparisons to Bryce Harper. I mean, what the heck? Aren't we due for that? It's been a while since we've had a kid that we could call a superstar here.
Looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun watching him. People are really pumped up. This is Paul Schneiderman on the 89th edition of Sports Untold with longtime Seattle sports media figure Jim Moore. Hey, Jim, this is going to be a controversial question. This one's going to maybe hit you a little bit and how to analyze it. All right, 33-year-old Tim Tebow is now apparently trying out as a tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I was reading some stuff on the internet and saw some stuff on Facebook. Some are frustrated. Some feel that a religious right white guy like Tebow is being given an NFL tryout chance, but Kaepernick, the African-American activist player, is not being given a chance. Is this just apples and oranges, or do you think some people critical of Tebow getting a chance that are pro-Kaepernick have a point?
Oh boy,
a lot there, huh?
Well, on the one hand, I think it's a cool story. Tim Tebow, boy, I mean, everybody was ripping him about not being a good enough quarterback in the NFL, and he proved those people right. So he's out of the league. He's coming back to be a tight end. And if you remove Kaepernick from any of this story, you look at it and you go, well, this will be interesting to watch, whether he fails or whether he does well there in Jacksonville. It'll be fun to see how it turns out. With Kaepernick, though, I did feel like he got blackballed from the NFL, and I just felt like he was screwed. I just didn't understand it. We used to talk about it on the radio show, and I would hear from people that, well, he's not good enough. If he was good enough, an NFL team would have given him a chance. And I used to look at his stats and go, well, wait a minute. I know that San Francisco wasn't very good his last year there, but when you look at his numbers, you can't begin to tell me that kid wasn't still good enough to hook on with a team. And then the comments would be, well, he wants to be a starter. Well, sure he wants to be a starter, but he was at least good enough to be a backup. You look at some of these backups like Geno Smith in Seattle, you mean to tell me that Colin Kaepernick wasn't better than Geno Smith?
Right.
And I would have said, you could have picked out 5 or 6 teams anyway where Kaepernick could have been the starter or at least competed to be one. So, I thought he got screwed to that whole deal. But, people didn't, the ownership didn't want to upset their fans because if he was getting down on a knee during the national anthem. And so I can see why people are coming out going, well, why Tebow get a shot and Kaepernick, why'd he not?
Right. Well, it's interesting, Jim, something else, that's a little irony here is that Tebow did his kneeling as well. Granted, it was a different type of kneeling and a different message, but a little irony there is that on that issue. But anyhow, that just food for thought on that. But
yeah, there is. I really wasn't aware of that with Tebow, but boy, I can't emphasize enough. I was in the camp of feeling like that Kaepernick got hosed on that whole deal, and that he should have had an opportunity somewhere.
You're not alone. He probably got a huge settlement for his employment case, but that's here nor there. Hey, Jim, by the way, how'd you get the whole sports media bug? I knew you grew up, I believe, in the east side of Seattle. Tell us how you kind of got the bug to go into sports media and journalism.
Well, at an early age, the Sonics came to town. I was always a sports fan. I was a big fan of baseball, basketball, football, anything that was going on. I was actually a Husky fan growing up. I loved Sonny Sixkiller, and I would go to the games with my mom. We had season tickets, and so I just was trying to think of something I could do for a living when I got older that would be fun and rewarding. And I started following the Sonics when they got to town. I think I was 10 years old, and I would keep a box score every game and listen to Bob Blackburn. And I thought, man, that'd be really cool if I could be a sports writer someday. And my parents subscribed to the Post-Intelligencer, so Paul, I would sit there and read the sports section every day and think about, man, I sure hope I can work at the PI someday, and my dream would be to cover the Sonics. And that was kind of where it started, was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a living. And sports was always part of my life as a kid, growing up in Redmond, and put the two together. And then I got a job at the PI, I think around 86 or 87, and then I started covering the Sonics in 1990. So it was sure fun, because when I covered the team, the 6 years that I covered them, they averaged like 58 or 60 wins a year. They went to the NBA Finals in 96. And so, yeah, for a kid that grew up listening to Bob Blackburn, I definitely had to pinch myself sometimes when I was, especially like at Boston Garden. I'd be sitting there pinching myself thinking, man, I'm courtside at Boston Garden watching NBA games, and they're flying me all over the country to go to these games. I felt really grateful that I had that run that I did there at the Post-Intelligencer.
What a cool job! You've worked in a field, Jim, that so many American kids would love to work in, and it's neat you've had a long run in your career. Hey, Jim, I remember back in the Sonics relocation battle days, the 07, 08 era, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I remember that you were kind of ambivalent about the Sonics and about the future of the NBA in Seattle. Let me know if I'm mischaracterizing how you thought it all. But looking back, 13 years later, would you be really gung-ho about having the team come back? Although at one time you were kind of cynical about the Sonics?
Well, I would. And, it's interesting you say that, Paul, because I do remember when all that was happening that just personally I had burned out on the NBA. It wasn't as interesting to me anymore. But that was my own personal thought about it. Like,
sure.
Have I missed the Sonics personally? No, I haven't. I don't really watch the NBA. It sounds terrible to say that because I know how passionate people are and how screwed over the city got when the team moved to Oklahoma City. So I understand that. I'm just talking on a personal level.
Sure.
But, looking back on it, I feel terrible for all the people that have missed the NBA for the last 12 years. And that includes my kids. They're 17 years old. They love the NBA. And I especially feel like kids have missed out because, I was a kid who grew up with the Sonics. And they were taken away for the wrong reasons. And I've thought about when they come back. And we know now that the arena, Climate Pledge Arena, is almost complete. The Kraken's going to start playing there this fall. I imagine in the next 2 to 3 years, and I'd say 5 years tops, they're going to have the Sonics back. And, Paul, I think if I go to the first game and I see all these former Sonic legends there, Gary Payton and Sean Kemp will be there, and some other Sonics legends too. Jack Sickman will probably be there. But it's going to be, I think I'll have tears. And I'm going to be a sentimental old fool anyway.
Likewise.
But I think it's really going to be a moving night when that happens. And then, if you fast forward another 5 years, if they were to ever play Oklahoma City in Western Conference Finals, what that would be like. So I'm hoping. Well, I'm not even hoping it's going to happen. I already know it's going to happen with that new arena that they have, and you hear all the people in the NBA, Charles Barkley, all these guys who are associated with it. They love coming to Seattle. It's one of their favorite road trips. It sure as heck is going to be back here pretty soon.
It seems that way, Jim. So I guess in sort of extrapolating your answer, tell me if I'm on the right track, that you don't miss the NBA that much, but if the Sonics were to return, you'd think it would be cool, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it'd be great for everybody because, something was taken away that was unjustified. And so, when it comes back, and we all know it's going to be, the name will be the Sonics. It'll be a different team, but they're going to be the Sonics. It's just like when the Browns returned to Cleveland, even though they had moved to Baltimore. But anyway, it's going to be fun, and I can't wait for that. But, in the meantime, I'm excited about this hockey team, and I don't even know anything about hockey, but I want to get on board. I want to get up to speed. I want to learn more about the game, and I think that's going to be fun, too.
That's how I feel, too. Looking forward to the NHL in Seattle. Paul Schneiderman again on Sports Untold, having a lot of fun interviewing Jim Moore, a longtime Seattle sports columnist. Hey, Jim, I know you're a diehard WSU Cougar, and I'm a Husky. Don't hold that against me. But I remember that you didn't really click with former WSU coach Mike Leach. You weren't crazy about his just whole style. Do you think too many Cougar fans and the WSU administration gave him too much of a blank check? Kind of like the guy who gets the girlfriend that although the girlfriend's not very nice to him, he's so happy to have the girlfriend that he puts up a lot of stuff, or vice versa, the woman that puts up a lot of stuff with her boyfriend. Do you think in a way WSU in general put up with Leach too much?
Yeah, I do. It was kind of funny, Paul, when he came, and I was excited as any other Cougar fan when he came to town because I thought, man, this guy has really done it, and we knew about his track record at Texas Tech, and it would be fun with the air raid, and boy, we were really going to be great guns with him there, and we were. For the most part, we had winning seasons. We went to bowl games, but his act wore thin on me, I think, earlier than most Cougar fans. And people would say to me, well, Jim got butthurt over an interview that went south. I mean, come on, Paul. I've had a million interviews go south.
Right.
So it was weird how he just lashed out at me. I will admit that. But then it was a pattern where, everybody would think he was the greatest ever in these interviews, talking about, who would win mascot battles or giving wedding advice and that kind of thing. Well, Mike Leach, he's sure funny. God, he's great. I just got sick of him. I got sick of the arrogance. I got sick of, and it's not like, Paul, I'm not the most classy individual. I like to think I have some class,
right.
But this guy has no class whatsoever, and I didn't like him representing my school. And I thought we sold a part of our soul at Washington State to, bring this guy in and like, oh, please, pretty please, fix our football program. And the way the Apple Cup just went completely south. I mean, that thing, it's not even competitive right now. We were never competitive in that game, and I was sick of him. I was out on a trail with my dogs when I heard the announcement that he was going to Mississippi State, and I was like, hallelujah. I am so happy this guy's gone. I couldn't take it. It just wasn't worth it to me because I just thought he was an ass.
Well, Jim, it's just kind of interesting because it seems like you were kind of in minority in Cougar Nation. I don't know how to quantify it, but it just seems that you were a guy that just clearly did not like a lot of stuff that Leach was doing with his behavior. But it just seemed like, to me, although I'm a Husky, it just seemed like Washington State was putting up with him too much. Didn't he try to leave for a couple other jobs before he took the Mississippi State job too? The Tennessee job.
Right. He was going to take the Tennessee job the year before, and then I think there was an agreement. The Tennessee athletic director met him in L.A., and it sounded like there was an agreement that he was going to be named the Tennessee coach. And then the next morning, the president of the university there in Tennessee fired the athletic director, and so they went in a different direction. But it was a weird one for me, Paul, because I've never really been in a position where I wasn't 100% on board rooting for Washington State, but I knew that if I rooted for the Cougs, that meant, and if they did well, that meant that Leach was going to be there longer. So I went into games kind of sort of rooting for the Cougs.
Really? That's interesting. From Mr. Cougar, Jim Moore saying that.
I put on a good face for my kids because I know they didn't really care about how Leach treated reporters or people in general that, that weren't kind to him or whatever. It wasn't like I was hoping we were going to lose, but I didn't want us to win too much because I knew that this asshole would still be there longer. So
well, that's a way of looking at it.
I couldn't take it. And you know what's funny?
Yeah.
Is that at the end, I mean, people that probably were, thinking I was a disloyal Coug or, I can't believe that, he's not getting along with Leach. And I think they all came around to my way of thinking, not all of them, but more than there used to be. And they, figured out that he wasn't what he appeared to be.
Well, not to get too political here, he reminds me of Biden's predecessor in some ways, but that's here nor there. Hey, Jim, I've asked this question. We can call it the Paul Schneiderman question. I think people are getting sick of me asking this question, but I get the best answers here. So let me go through some answers I've received this question. Then I'm going to ask you the question, okay? Grosby answered Floyd Merriweather. Two guests, Dave Sims and Alan Dershowitz, answered Sandy Koufax. I had Dershowitz on, by the way, recently, if you're wondering, because he was involved in the Kurt Flood case and has written on some sports law stuff. Let's see here. Softy and Dick Fain answered Tiger Woods. Furness said Russell Wilson. Percy Allen, Mike Tyson. Steve Kelly, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Jackie McCormick, a former female college basketball player, answered Serena Williams. Steve Rabel, Bill Russell, Puckett answered Michael Jordan. Kenny Anderson, former NBA player, answered Joe Montana. Giving you a lot of clues here. Greg Lewis answered LeBron James. If you could have an interview, Jim, or extended conversation with a living sports figure, can be a general manager, agent, owner, broadcaster, player, somebody in the sports world, who would it be? Pick one person.
Well, can it be one that I've had an interview with that I would like to have another interview with, or is it one that I've never had an interview with?
Pick them both. I don't worry.
well, Charles Barkley comes to mind for me. I mean, Charles Barkley is the guy. See, I always want to interview people that are just out there and just will say anything. And
right.
You know that even if you have a bad day as an interviewer, you're going to get good answers from a guy like Charles Barkley.
For sure.
And so it's just kind of a given. I never really wanted to go very deep into issues and stuff when I was writing at the PI, because I felt like Art Thiel was going to handle all that stuff, and then I'll do the bells and whistles and the other stuff in sports. And so a guy like Barkley is top of the list for me. And I didn't really interview him as much as hang out with him for a day, because I caddied for him at a Pro-Am event down in Lake Tahoe.
Oh, wow.
And so I've never really sat down and talked to him for, say, a half an hour, but I did spend, 5 hours with him on the golf course down there and seeing him interact with fans, and, wrote something about that. Probably my favorite story that I've written in 35 years is Sports Writing.
Isn't that cool that you spent all that time at Barkley? Well, who's another name? So you've met Barkley, you've talked to him. Can you throw a name out of someone that you've never talked to and you ever interviewed before? You'd love to interview a living sports figure.
Well, I probably would like to interview Willie Mays, and I say that because, well, he just turned 90, and Willie Mays was my favorite player growing up. I loved Willie Mays. And, there were nights, not very many, but there were some nights where I'd lay in bed and you could get like KGO in San Francisco, and it was kind of staticky, but I could hear some of the Giants games late at night. And then I just always loved him. And when I was 10 years old, my parents took me to Candlestick Park, and I got to watch the game that Willie Mays played in. And then we went to the All-Star game in Anaheim that year and watched him play there. And, it's kind of funny to call about, I want to say 15, 20 years ago. I was in Scottsdale. My sister lives down there. And her husband had a connection to Willie Mays. And so I went over to meet him, my childhood hero. And I was just there just to meet him and say, hey, thanks for your time. And wanted to tell him, about how much I loved him as a kid. And that was all it was going to be. And when he said, what do you do now for a living? I said, I'm a sports writer. Well, he shut down immediately because he thought I was there to, somehow like I was being sneaky, trying to get a story about him. But
interesting.
Yeah, so I would love to be able to go back and be able to interview him and just tell him that I went there, and of course he wouldn't remember it, but I do. I went there with good intentions. And when I left, I felt kind of bad. Like sometimes you don't want to find out too much about these people that you idolize because you might be disappointed.
Right.
And I was that day. I was disappointed. But in his defense, he's got so many people coming at him all the time, and I can see why he was suspicious.
You must have read my mind, Jim, a little bit. That I was about to mention Willie Mays would be a living sports figure I'd love to interview. And I would have loved to have interviewed Hank Aaron, but he sadly passed a couple months ago. But yeah, I know what you mean. Working as an attorney, Jim, I find sometimes when people find out I'm an attorney, they can kind of shut down a certain way. Have you kind of gotten that over the years as a sports writer or a sports person? Willie Mays is an interesting example of that. Have you gotten that a little bit over the years?
Oh, I suppose. Yeah, people, get get concerned about, how, oh, you're a sports writer. And it seems like sports writers aren't held in the highest regard sometimes. I mean, some people think it's cool, but other people are probably thinking, oh, he's looking for dirt. It's kind of funny because when I look back on it, when I was covering the Sonics, I never really wanted to go in the locker room. It wasn't like I thought it was cool to go in the locker room, but I had to do it for my job. I wasn't in there. I never really was looking for dirt. I know people think that sports writers are always looking for dirt, or
Right.
maybe some people think that. I was just looking for a good story. I wasn't looking for dirt. I just wanted something that people would read, and I always wanted to write something that people wouldn't get anywhere else. That was kind of what I always wanted to do when I worked at the PI. Is I just thought, and now it's even tougher to do that for these guys who are sports columnists, especially with all the Zoom meetings and the access not being what it used to be. It's harder to get one-on-one interviews with athletes and coaches and general managers, but that was what I was always trying to do. I never really went looking for dirt. Well, I shouldn't say never. There were probably times where I was looking for dirt, but
I know
not
what you
very
mean.
often.
I know what you mean. Just trying to get a story out. And who's a deceased sports figure in history you would have loved to have interviewed or had an extended conversation with? I get the name Ali a lot. Mention a name.
Oh my God, Muhammad Ali would be a great one. I probably, if you're talking Muhammad Ali, I almost would rather talk to Joe Frazier than Muhammad Ali. And I say that because I was a huge boxing fan when I was a kid. It was one of the things my dad and I would always get into, and they didn't have very many televised fights back then. You would kind of listen on the radio, and they'd give you a round by round of what happened. But I just would like to know what it was like being Joe Frazier, because Ali always picked on him. And I know that Ali beat him 2 out of 3 times, but my God, I was so happy when Frazier beat him that one time. And I just, would like to go back and say, hey, Smoking Joe, I was a big fan of yours. I always wanted you to beat Muhammad Ali. And, what was it like? What was it like being his foil? And the way he was always getting in your face and making fun of you, that type of thing. So, yeah, Joe Frazier comes to mind.
Oh, he'd be a fascinating guy to talk to. Hey, let me back up on something else. Back to college football for a second, Jim. I was listening to Furness and Mahler and Dick Fain talk about this in separate conversations, I guess at your news station, 950. The idea of Washington State University and University of Washington playing in a separate conference. Furness and Mahler really do not like the idea. Fain says he wouldn't mind if Wazoo and UW split up. How do you stand on that hypothetical possibility, Jim?
Oh, I haven't even thought about that. I don't even, but now that you mention it, I don't like it at all. I just, I grew up being a Pac-8 guy and then a Pac-10 guy and now a Pac-12 guy. And I love our conference the way it is. I'm a person who doesn't like change very much anyway, but I just am always pulling for the Pac-12. I had so much fun watching the NCAA tournament this year, seeing the Pac-12 do well, and I get so sick of people just ripping on the Pac-12, and it was nice to see them have success, especially the Beavers and then UCLA, how they played. I mean, it was just fantastic. I really enjoyed that. So, no, I don't, people have talked in the past about, the Cougs suck, they should go to the Big Sky or whatever, I never want any of that stuff. I just like it the way it is.
Yeah, I think it'd be a shame. I mean, having 2 intrastate rivalries with a long history, Washington State and UW splitting up in different conferences. But I want to get your perspective, and I tend to share where you're coming from. Paul Schneiderman again on Sports Untold in the 89th edition with Jim Moore, having a lot of fun. Hey, Jim, I had a guy on my show back in late 2018, a professor named Andrew Zimbalist, and he is a sports economist. He actually testified in the Sonics lease trial. I know that you covered that, and he's an interesting guy, kind of quirky, but very, very smart. Zimbalist is of the belief that college athletics has a terrible financial model, that most of even the most prominent universities are running deficits in their athletic department. Zimbalist believes that the NCAA should be abolished and a new federally chartered college athletic administration should start and take over the NCAA. He literally believes he should break it, like some say break the big banks. How do you feel about Zimbalist's rather radical idea of just completely breaking up the NCAA.
I know a lot of people are talking about that. You should pay the players and all these different things. I'm just so used to the way things are right now. I know you can make cases for what he's proposing there, but I'll just go back to my last answer too. I'm fine with the way things are.
Gotcha. Here's another proposal Zimbalist has. Some of these quirky academics can be kind of interesting. He also advocated at one time that Division I football teams should be allowed to have up to 15 non-matriculated students play on their team. Would you be open to something like that, some kind of hybrid model where there could be some college players on like a different track getting paid?
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. I'd be interested to see how that would work out.
Yeah. It seems to me that would be kind of more honest in a way if you just had some players playing that really weren't attending school. It's kind of how it is right now in some ways, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, it certainly is, Paul. Yeah. I like that idea.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to throw out a couple Andrew Zimbalist ideas. I told you I was going to ask you a few quirky questions, so well, we're having fun. Hey, I read your column recently on the idea of the Seahawks trading Russell Wilson for Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay Packers, and what an interesting column. Here's a hypothetical, Jim. If the salary cap was not an issue, do you think Russell would have already been traded by now?
Oh, boy. I do, that's an interesting way you phrase that question, because I do think you're right about that. I think the dead cap money is like $34 million or something like that. So, yeah, I think you're probably right. They probably would have made a move like that. It just seemed weird this whole off season with Russell, and it just didn't seem like he was happy. It seemed like his agent said, well, we don't want to move on, but if the Seahawks trade us, here's where we want to go. So, yeah, I think you're probably right about that, Paul.
Well, I just asked the question. I don't know. I don't follow the salary cap nuances and details that much, but it just seems to me that, at least as a casual fan, that's a big block from trading him. I don't know.
Yeah, it does seem that way, though. I think if there hadn't been any dead cap money like that, I think maybe he would have gone. Maybe especially when you think about the Seahawks only having 3 draft picks this year, and John Schneider doesn't like that at all. He likes having 6 or 8 anyway. So I'm sure that would have been more of an enticement to trade him. But yeah, it's going to be fun to see how it works out this year with the new offensive coordinator, and see if Pete Carroll with his run first offense can get along with Russell and his let it cook philosophy.
What's your next column going to be on, Jim?
I don't know, Paul. I usually let's see, I'm writing for the Sun next week, so I'll probably just maybe something on Kelnick. We'll see how he does in the next few games, and write something about him.
Looking forward. You got a couple more minutes?
I gotta go.
You gotta go. Okay.
My tea time's at 11:48, and I need to check in. But,
gotcha, Jim. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I'd love to get you back one day. I got a few more questions I could try to cook up, but thank you for coming on Sports Untold on Rainier Ave Radio, Jim. Had a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I really appreciate it. Anytime,
Jim. All the best with everything. We'll be in touch.
Hey, Paul, if you want to do something later, if you have more questions, I don't want to be rude or anything. I just, my tea time's at 11:40.
No, you told me that. Totally understand. Love to get you back one day. All the best, Jim. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
You too.